Good evening, everyone. I'm going to do a talk now called In the Temple of the Muse, what to do with spiritual poetry, art, and the Muse in general. So in Greek mythology, there are 9 muses. They're the goddesses who provide over the arts and sciences and inspire those who excel at these pursuits. They are daughters of Zeus, king of the gods, and Mnemosyne, which means memory. Their name, akin to the Latin mens and English mind, is also related to the Sanskrit word manas and denotes memory or a reminder, as in earlier times poets, having no books to read, relied upon their memories. The word muse can also be associated as a verb with the act of deep thought or meditation. You can muse upon something. But nowadays, muse is a word used in a wider sense as someone or something, usually female, that provides inspiration to a poet or to a writer, to a painter or a musician. But it can be said to be the source of inspiration on so many different levels. It would be true to say that the level of inspiration has been somewhat lost in this world, and so has the sacred nature of the muse. H.P. Blavatsky, in an article on genius, writes, "Behold it," meaning occult philosophy, saith, "in every manifestation of genius, when combined with virtue, in the warrior or the bard, the great painter, artist, statesman, or man of science, who soars high above the heads of the vulgar herd, the undeniable presence of the celestial exile, the divine ego, whose jailer thou art, O man of matter. Thus that which we call deification applied to the immortal God within, not to the dead walls or the human tabernacle that contained him or her. And this was done in tacit and silent recognition of the efforts made by the divine captive who, under the most adverse circumstances of incarnation, still succeeded in manifesting himself." So this is showing that true genius comes from the divine sense, whereas what is often called genius in modern times is just an abnormal development of the memory. So she goes on to say, "Thus between the true and the artificial genius, one born from the light of the immortal ego, the other from the evanescent will-o'-the-wisp of the terrestrial or purely human intellect and the animal soul, there is a chasm, to be spanned only by him or her who aspires ever onward, who never loses sight, even when in the depths of matter, of that guiding star, the divine soul and mind, what we call buddhi manas. The latter does not require, as does the former, cultivation. The words of the poet, who asserts that the lamp of genius, if not protected, pruned, and fed with care, soon dies or runs to waste with fitful glare, can apply only to artificial genius, the outcome of culture and of purely intellectual acuteness. It is not the direct light of the Manasa Putras, the sons of wisdom. For true genius, lit at the flame of our higher nature, or the ego, with capital EGO, the higher ego, cannot die." Then the highest manifestation of this muse can be said to be our own higher nature, or more poetically, the spiritual sun, which illumines our inner being, as surely as the physical sun nurtures our mortal frame. In a letter by the Master K.H. Kutumi, he says, "A true seer is always a poet, and a poet can never be a true one unless he is in perfect unity with occult nature, a creator by right of his spiritual revelation, as the great Danish poet expresses it," although who the great Danish poet is has never said. "For it is not enough to carry the true poetic instincts within the recesses of one's own soul, These have to be so faithfully mirrored in verse or prose as to carry the intelligent reader away, wherever the poet's fancy may wing its flight. I find that these are wonderful words, because I write poetry and I think those are great words. Because true poetry has a mantric quality that has a definite effect upon the consciousness of the reader. True poets, as K.H. says, write or speak from an elevated state of consciousness. What they experience can never be expressed in words, but they try, because they feel they need to share their perceptions. It is the altruistic nature of true poets who have realized the oneness of all things that prompts them to try to share their experiences, to somehow inspire others to follow. It is also important to note that the poetic spirit is a way of life and expresses itself in all that we do and indeed what we are. It is far beyond just putting words onto paper. I think there are a lot of mute poets who have never written anything, who will just live a poetic life just by being the way they are. So all the great spiritual writings in the world are poetic. The Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada, the Quran, the Voice of the Silence, Tao Te Ching, the Upanishads, etc., Buddhist scriptures, and so forth, because this kind of language speaks to the soul and not to the intellect. They're all derived from the same inspiration, the same muse. It is the most effective way of trying to get across to the reader the feel of spirituality. It is still only a very vague approximation, yet much better than cold prose. One problem is the language used. Original works written, for example, in Sanskrit, which is an extremely spiritual language, have words for which there is no equivalent in English, which has developed, of course, in a materialistic atmosphere. Therefore, again, only vague approximations can be used, and the largest part of the meaning may be lost. It is sometimes better to read the work in the original Sanskrit, as although our lower minds will understand nothing, our higher minds may be able to intuitively comprehend the universal truths contained therein, due to the collective consciousness that we all share. A clue to one aspect of this operation is given by the Theosophist W.Q. Judge, who was one of the early founders of the Society, 1875. He was asked if the mind actually does anything when it reaches out to seek light on some subject. He answered, "It actually does. A thread or a finger or a long darting current flies out from the brain to seek for knowledge. It goes in all directions and touches all of the minds it can reach so as to receive the information if possible. This is telepathically, so to say, accomplished. There are no patents on true knowledge of philosophy, no copyrights in the realm. Personal rights of personal life are fully respected, save by potential black magicians who would take anyone's property. But general truth belongs to all. And when the unseen messenger from one mind arrives and touches the real mind of another, that other gives up to it what it may have of truth about general subjects. In other words, or on higher realms, we are not alone. And a sincere effort to comprehend something of spiritual subjects will bring us en rapport with minds that can give us that information, or with the storehouse of thought that contains the vibrations that we need. So a lack of comprehension from an intellectual level does not necessarily mean a corresponding lack of understanding on higher levels. Information is available to a sincere soul with altruistic motives. Brought down to our own level, which is an ability and desire to touch hearts that constitutes the true poet. Many of the great poets, musicians, artists, and writers have the power to evoke tears of longing in the hearts of the reader or the listener. This is because they convey something of the flavour of our true spiritual home, some of the atmosphere of our true nature that we are exiled from at the moment. George William Russell, known as A.E., the Irish mystical writer and theosophist, says in his book, Song and Its Fountains, I think all true poetry was conceived on the Mount of Transfiguration, and there is a revelation in it and the mingling of heaven and earth. The Mount is a symbol for that peak of soul when gone inward into itself, it draws nigh to its own divine root, and memory and imagination are shot through and through with the radiance of another nature. Beautiful words. So it is this radiance that touches the pen of the poet, and which he or she tries to add to the ambience of the poem. Mystical poetry contains this radiance, and also the sound that pervades the universe, the one sound seemingly broken into countless sounds as it filters through billions of instruments. Akasha is said to be the sounding board of the universe. In the same way, every one of us, our thoughts, dreams, and aspirations, the way we look at others, our relationships, and so on, all modify this one pure sound until it echoes from our hearts, stamped with the signature of our very being, and flows from us into many different forms: music, poetry, song, prose, dance, art. But still the same sound that glows in the heart of the true poet, the true muse, incarnates in many ways. The sunset, the wind in the trees, the eyes of a beautiful woman, the song of the heaven-seeking skylark, they are all reflections of the one muse. And the universe itself is the temple of the muse, the playground for this one sound manifesting in a kaleidoscope of sound and colour. Just like Plotinus teaching on beauty, that all beauty is a reflection of the one beauty that pervades this universe. But in a meditative state, the beauty on any level and in any plane of being can become a doorway to this true beauty that floods the universe and our hearts, and also passes beyond the reality to that true reality as is free from all attributes. So many of the world's poets have captured some manifestation of this beauty. We have the Sufi poet Rumi, whose love poems are almost overwhelmingly lovely. And then we have the starkly beautiful poems of the Zen poet Ryokan, equally effective, but in a different way. We have Tagore and Kabir, Gibran and Nazir in the East, and our Western poets, Shelley, Wordsworth, Yeats, Tennyson, and very many more, who express things differently perhaps, but again convey this same sense. No man ever did or ever will work well, but either from actual sight or sight of faith, says Ruskin, the art critic, speaking of art. All the truly great poets worship in the temple of the muse, but many modern poets and artists and musicians worship at the temple of Mammon, or Mammon, or the personal self. This seems much more prevalent in the West. Poets who are dedicated to the purely spiritual have the power to raise our consciousness through the word. As said earlier, their works are mantric in many ways. Some of the Zen poets have a minimalistic approach. So in the haiku, which consists of only 3 lines, 5, 7, 5 syllables, these contain the very essence of what the poet wished to say. Comparable to the Chinese and Japanese paintings that say more through the spaces than the actual lines or images. Now listen to this haiku. Along this way, no travellers, dusk in autumn. Along the way, no travellers, dusk in autumn. And this conveys a very clear image, to me anyway, which more words would actually obscure. It's leaving you to fill in the spaces with your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own feelings, your own intuitive understanding of what it means. The sign of a true poet or musician or artist is originality, the courage to express what is real to them. They may spawn 1,000 imitators, some perhaps technically better than they are, but the creative impulse was theirs, and the followers, without this original impulse, could not produce what they did in the same way. By analogy, we can see how this applies to spiritual leaders as well, and to the origin of the whole universe. As above, so below. Theosophical teaching says that the primal thought originated with the Logos, was put into action by hosts of intelligent powers and forces. But we must not fall into the great heresy of separateness. Even this Logos or Demiurgus is only the aggregate of the Jian Chuans and other forces. In the same way, the true poet, musician or artist tunes into some great spiritual truth or idea and tries to manifest it in a way comprehensible to us all, to all of us, you know. Which at the same time may obscure the naked truth, but it is better to gaze upon the Muse clothed rather than in all her glory. It is like the dance of the 7 veils. Each veil needs to be removed slowly and poetically if we are to absorb truth in a way that does not overwhelm us. It's bit by bit before we can reach the naked truth. One poet who captured the whole idea perfectly was Rabindranath Tagore. In his poem My Song, he says, "This song of mine will wind its music around you, my child, like the fond arms of love. This song of mine will touch your forehead like a kiss of blessing. When you are alone, it will sit by your side and whisper in your ear. When you are in the crowd, it will fence you about with aloofness. My song will be like a pair of wings in your dreams. It will transport your heart to the verge of the unknown. It will be like the faithful star overhead when dark night is over your road. My song will sit in the pupils of your eyes and will carry your sight into the heart of things. When my voice is silenced in death, my song will speak in your living heart." So those are very beautiful words, and that just gives an idea of the importance of poetry and the power of poetry and the people who create it, their motive, their ideas, what they wanted to do. So Tagore was in tune with the Muse that inspires all those who have the correct aspiration and motivation. Krishna tells us ceaselessly in the Bhagavad Gita to fix our whole attention upon him and no one else, meaning that our focus should be always on the spiritual, no matter what we do in our day-to-day lives. The Muse must be in our hearts constantly. Krishna, in this sense, is the higher self. We have to realize what it is in reality to live this spiritual life. Most of us amuse ourselves with books and intellectual jugglery, thinking that this gives us insight into our true nature. But merely to be able to figure out what something means intellectually does not mean that we have to understand it and that we have understood it, and that we need to weave it into the fabric of our being and make it a living reality in our daily lives. The most important thing in all this is to make sure that our motives are the highest and that we are dedicated to the divine and that we are aware that this divinity shines in the heart of all beings, regardless of race, creed, sex, caste, or colour. We need to feel pity, even for the most evil of beings, because we can see that they are building for themselves a future of suffering and of pain. Whereas their victims will indeed get the compensation for the suffering that was inflicted upon them. If we are writers or musicians or artists, we should make sure that our motives are true. We need to learn the art of touching hearts, of awakening others to the spiritual side of their nature, of making them aware of their true selves, of cultivating that longing to return to the good, the true, and the beautiful that has its home deep inside. If God or the infinite is the muse of many, we also need to see the good in humanity and make that our muse, our constant inspiration, always having an eye to the progress of our fellow human beings and fellow creatures, and cultivating this love for all things in the depth of our hearts and minds. It may be taught that we have to go beyond human feelings to realise the true spiritual, but on this earth we must never lose the power or the feeling that makes us say to another, "You are beautiful," or "I love you." If only the terrorists the world over could say that of another, instead of dreaming of a utopia built on foundations of suffering and pain and violence. A golden age can only come about as a result of brotherly love and cooperation. The true poet, musician, and artist nurture in their hearts this inspiration as they try to make some sense of the suffering in the world and seek to bring a little light into the darkness of this Kali Yuga, which is the age of darkness that we're going through at the moment. They see something beautiful, permanent, inspiring, and therapeutic behind the facade in which we live, move, and have our being. This wonderful universe is indeed the temple of the Muse. Let us praise the gods that there are. Let us praise those gods and be thankful that there are those who are capable, through words, symbols, sounds, images, and music, of bringing us shining gifts from this Muse, which can alleviate some of the sufferings of the world and help us to bring about a golden age of light and love. Let us never give up, but always have faith in the inherent divinity of the human race and believe that good will prevail in the end, if only a few can keep this sacred light shining for those who follow. Let us also keep in mind that we are always in the temple of the Muse, and by seeing the beauty and goodness in everything, we may see through the persona, the mask, we see through it to the enduring reality behind. Thus, in our own way, we can bring a little of that beauty and light into the hearts and minds of others. This is an essential task in these dark times, and we can all contribute something in our own way to the spiritual regeneration of humanity. And to finish with a poem from the Zen poet Ryokan, my legacy, what will it be? Flowers in spring, the cuckoo in summer, and the crimson maples of autumn. Thank you very much for listening. Om Shanti, 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 peace, peace, peace. Peace on earth and goodwill to all beings.